Example2.jsp. This one is going to output a times table. So it's going to get from the request the value of the table num parameter, store it in the string table, which is then used as the value for one of the attributes in the times table tag. Let's go and take a look at this tag in the library. So here's the tag, times table, handled by the times table tag class, which is this one over here. This time the body content is JSP. In other words, the body is not empty. It's going to have something for us to process. There are three attributes. The table num, which is required and can take runtime expressions. The line ID name, which is required and cannot take runtime expressions. And the result name, which is required and cannot take runtime expressions. Therefore, over here, when we set up the tag, we've got the attribute called table num that takes the current value that came in from the user as a request parameter that has now been picked up and stored in the string variable table. And then the other two attributes define the name of the beans that will be used here and here. In other words, when that tag executes, it's going to produce a value for a variable called line and a value for the variable called product that will then be used within the body of this tag. There are three attributes: table num, line ID name, result name. And therefore, over in the handler, we've got the three object level variables with their corresponding set methods. We've also got these integers here. Table, which will be the integer of the string held by table num, and line num, that is going to keep count of the times table line that we're dealing with. And data OK is set to false. So again, in doStart tag, which is going to be called as soon as this tag has been set up. In other words, the values of the attributes have been passed to the handler by calling the set methods. So doStart tag will now execute. And what it has to do is to take the string that holds this table num, parse it, as we did in the previous example, and store the int value in table. If that doesn't parse, we get a number format exception and skip the body. On the other hand, if this does parse OK, line num is going to be set to 0. Data OK is going to be set to true because the attribute values have been validated and found to be OK. And then we call this method called next loop. So let's scroll down to that. Next loop simply adds 1 to line num. So the very first time when line num is 0, line num plus plus will increment it to 1. So we're now on line 1. We'll then calculate result based on the current value of line num multiplied by the current value of table. So if the user on the HTML form typed the number 5, that will have come in as a request parameter. It will have been picked up by the JSP, plugged in as the value for the table num attribute on the tag. The string 5 will have been then stored in that variable. Then it will have been parsed back into an integer 5, stored in table, and now is being used in this calculation to calculate. So let's stick with 5 as our value. Line num is currently 1, so 1 times 5 is 5. Result now has got the value 5. We now need to set up two attributes, one containing whatever name is held in there, which came from here, so that's going to be called line. So line is going to have the value 1, and product is going to be used here and have the value 5. So that having called next loop here, we then come back up to the doStart tag and return eval body include. In other words, it's an instruction to the Java server page to pick up those values and then to use them in the body of this tag. Line is 1, table is 5, product is 5. 1 times 5 equals 5. That's the end of the body. Do after body is now called. And we check to see what value line num has. Well, it's got the value 1, which is less than 12. And therefore, we call next loop again, which will increment line num, that's now got the value 2, calculate result, that's now 10, and set those page scope attributes again. Having done that next loop, return eval body again. In other words, come back to here and start evaluating that tag body all over again. But of course this time, because we're using the beans again and fetching them again from the page scope, it means that we get the new values. 2 for line, 10 for product. We get another table row being output in the HTML. 2 times 5 equals 10. That's the end of the body, so do after body is called again. And so it goes on until that condition fails, becomes false. At which point, we don't bother incrementing and setting up another product, we simply return skip body. That's the indication then to the Java server page to stop executing this tag. And so it comes then to the end of the tag. It calls the doTag method. Now what's been happening all this time is one of two things. If there was a problem in the doStart tag because the string for table num was not an integer, data OK will still be false. The other scenario is that there wasn't a problem. The tag body has been executed several times and has been producing output for the Java server page. But the output has not actually been put into the Java server page's output stream. It's been buffered, been held in a temporary area. And the reason for that is, even at this stage, there might be some checks that have to be done that after the body has finished being executed, those checks might say, actually, there's still a problem, and therefore, the output from this tag should not be sent to the JSP output stream. In other words, all the way back to the web browser. And so we've got a choice to make. If data is okay, then we're going to redirect the buffered output from this tag, redirect it into the JSP's output stream. And so this is what happens here. If the body content is not null, in other words, if we've actually generated some output from this tag, we will attempt this, get previous output. In other words, because the out has been redirected into the buffer, previous out is actually the real output stream back to the web browser. So get previous out will now give us the print writer for the web browser. And we can then print, in other words, we're going to send to the web browser the body content as a string. All of these table rows that were being supposedly output never went back to the web browser because the output stream had been redirected into the tag's buffer. And so over here in the doEnd tag, what we're doing is getting hold of that buffered content from the tag body, and now we're printing it to the Java server page's output stream. When all that happens successfully, we'll then carry on evaluating the rest of the page. And of course, the release method is going to set everything to null so that the garbage collector will pick it up and dispose of it. This particular tag is iterative, and it's only iterative because of this bit in the doAfterBody. It's got a condition which, while that is true, will keep returning eval body again. And so it goes back to the beginning of the tag, evaluates the tag body again, and then doAfterBody is called again. So every time that returns eval body again, that tag body is executed. So it keeps iterating. There's no while loop in there, at least not that we can see. But if we were to have a look at the Java server page's servlet that is generated, what you will find in there is a while loop that says while eval body again, do this lot. And at the end of doing this lot, there will be, in the generated code in the servlet, another call to doAfterBody. So we're not actually seeing the full picture. We're not writing the full picture. We're making use of the knowledge of what gets generated in the servlet. And then eventually, when doAfterBody returns skip body, that will cause the while loop that's been generated into the servlet to terminate. And then at the end of the body, there will be, in the generated code in the servlet, a call to doEnd tag. And that's really how this tag ends up being iterative. So two examples, one of a tag without a body, that doesn't iterate, and this second example of a tag with a body and it iterates. Of course, you could have a tag with a body that doesn't iterate. That's okay too. In which case, what you would have is the doStart tag would return eval body include, so that the tag body is evaluated, at the end of which doAfterBody will be called, and whatever code you put in there, because you don't want it to iterate, you just call skip body immediately. That will then kick us straight out of the body and cause doEndTag. And there we have it. Those two examples that explain how the tag library descriptor, and the Java class that is effectively the tag handler all work together.